Uncle Doug.
Uncle Dan.
I think one of the themes of this week's episode has been flushing things out.
Right, yogurt up the bum.
And so I feel like Uncle Mark is going to continue that theme a little bit.
Yeah.
As we move
get the
forward.
toxins out the body. That's what we're talking about this week on a very special episode of Marianne Williamson this week. I think we've had some silliness on the show. Let's have a few serious moments, and then we'll try to ruin that. Today, I kind of want to do an exploratory how-to for our listeners, and I'm sure that more than a few of them have some experience with this topic. And I got to thinking about the criticality of this topic for people after Doug and I had a bottle of wine or three on my patio here in Vancouver last week, and we got drawn back, as we sometimes do, to the bad old days.
Oh yeah.
So, as many listeners know, Doug and myself are estranged from our parents and from pretty much the entire immediate family. And though we each pulled stakes at different times, we've had close to zero contacts for well over a decade, and nearly 2 for me. So for us, this state of affairs is actually normal, and in both our cases, it's the best possible scenario. So I want to talk about...
Although it is utterly shameful. And
we should be ashamed.
You should both feel terrible about it.
Thank you. The great sense of betrayal. Can you be like every friend we have and just pile on there? It's very helpful emotionally. So
Good.
So I want to talk about estrangement today and what we owe people in our lives, and maybe discuss how to know when the time has come for you to walk away. Every family, every relationship has its strains. Every partnership has some imbalance of give and take. I don't know how that part of the human condition could possibly be avoided unless you want to pull it into the wild scenario and try to live alone in a school bus in Alaska. You're going to spend your life giving and taking an unequal measure with everyone you meet, right?
Absolutely. It's an impossible, and you'll be the giver in some parts, and you'll be the taker in other parts, and it's always going to be a perpetually negotiated sort of scenario.
And that's okay. And so don't be a piece of shit and never talk to anyone again just because they ate the last pretzel in the bag, Doug. So it's not the normal day-to-day frustrations of having friends and family that we're talking about today. It's the dysfunctional, toxic, dangerous, high-demand relationships in life that are damaging to your physical, mental, and emotional health that move into the walk the fuck away territory, right?
Right.
And as the great bulk of our listeners will no doubt now be nodding their heads to, we know that the religious worldview can foster the extremely black and white ideologies in which excruciating interpersonal toxicities can spread.
Really? You're making that claim? Seems bold.
Episode 103, I'm finally ready to make this claim. So, there in Mormon country, we have an epidemic of forced estrangement of children from parents, often as minors, that frequently leads to, pretty dreadful outcomes.
Because of like religious rejection of gay kids or trans kids or whatever.
Yeah, or even kids that just begin to question the faith, right?
Well, that's true.
So a very brief PG-rated glimpse into the past that Uncle Doug and I were exploring the other night to lay the groundwork for our estrangement. So our very Mormon parents were not suited for the job of parenthood for reasons of both nature and nurture. Untreated mental illness played a huge role in the devastation we experienced at their hands. And Mormonism was the third abusive parent under our shitty roof. In fact, in all my years, I've never been able to tease the shitty humanity, the mental illness, and the religious fanaticism apart. They're
interesting.
For us, they're like the Trinity, like an undefinable beast with 3 heads that watches you sleep. A shittity, if you will. And to be clear, I'm not saying people with mental illness issues are bad people, of course. I'm saying our mother was an awful person who also refused to seek help for a range of issues that were afflicting her and therefore us. Beatings weren't always daily, but they were frequent. Rage was constant. It could explode at any second. Our father was a cop, and his uncontrollable temper provided no distinction between how he would have handled, say, an armed robber or a 9-year-old kid. So I thought I was going to die so frequently I can't count. And when Doug came along, I was sure either of my parents were going to murder my toddler brother in their frequent losses of control. And then the times between the violence were spells of neglect and utter dysfunction.
Wow.
So What Doug and I came from was a waking nightmare of neglect, abuse, and religiously turbocharged hatreds. Our parents, and in particular one of our siblings, robbed us of safety, security, dignity, self-worth, and importantly, the ability to think beyond getting through the next few minutes unharmed. Our entire childhoods and teenage years were simply reactionary. So I'm 50 years old and nearly 2 decades away from them, and I can say without emotion or hyperbole that our parents are terrible people, and I do not miss them. There was never a time I can look back on fondly, ever. So all that sucks a lot, but I was a dependent child, both of us were, with 0 life skills, and the terror of the world that their xenophobia and religious prejudices had pounded into us. So we got through it and got out when we could.
Yeah.
But here's what more interestingly as I think about this. I'm actually more angry about the decade or more I wasted trying to build a bridge back to people that had no interest in trying to make a loving relationship in the ruins than I am about the decades of abuse and violence. And any attempt to be in their presence was entirely on their terms. And I think this will sound really familiar to a lot of listeners.
Sure.
Certainly any discussion of the nightmares of our shared past was off limits, but so was any discussion of any topic considered contrary to the suffocating mores of Mormonism, or even any topic that was ever so slightly liberal was also completely banned. It was clear they were never going to make any admissions or take any responsibility for the devastation they caused and continued to cause. To my everlasting shame, I stayed partially in the closet during the years I wasted trying to project onto them the possibility of decent, functional humanity. So, those are years I took from myself, and I regret all the wasted time, effort, and mental health expended on such a useless task. As I got further, and Doug will probably agree with me here, as I got further away in time and space from them, and the more my life has improved and become full of love and fulfillment and professional and personal satisfaction, the more profound the sense of betrayal is. The better my life has become, I can more clearly see the contrast between what is actually happiness and what is misery more starkly. I can't ever get back what they took from me, nor what I foolishly continued to give for free for far too long. So in our lives, and in me and Doug's lives, estrangement is normal and, as I said, desirable. So how do you know if estrangement is right for you?
Right.
I'd say, ask your doctor. For real.
Yeah.
If you're in therapy and a relationship, and if you're hurting in such a way like this, I would suggest it. You can afford it and find one that isn't a religious kook, and we can help you with that. And so can Daryl Ray. If someone is, a relationship with someone is killing you, discuss leaving it, and that's definitely one way. But specifically to the parental issue, what do you owe toxic, abusive parents? We've all heard people...
Or even non-abusive parents who are still toxic, who are still, I mean, this doesn't have to be you feared for your life the whole time.
Right.
A parent
exactly.
can be emotionally toxic, and what do you owe that person to? Because your guys' was a little more cut and dry than I think some of our listeners' experience will be.
Yeah, and when I talk about toxicity or abuse, I'm not necessarily saying it had to be you got your ass kicked by a cop 4 times a week, right?
Right.
When you were 8 years old, there are all sorts of abuse, pathways and behaviors, and not all of them are physical. There's plenty of sexual abuse, but there's just plenty of emotional, psychological, verbal abuse that should make you question your relationship with this person. So we've all heard people say about their kids, I fed you, I clothed you, and what thanks do I get? So I would just say, in the completely appropriate words of Chris Rock, what do you want, a cookie? 2 people fucked, and 9 months later you appeared on the grid. Boom. You had nothing to do with those decisions,
right.
And you can't walk, talk, or feed yourself. It's their fucking job to feed and clothe you. And they would rightly be in jail if they didn't. Anybody pulling that bullshit knows they've already lost the argument, right?
Well, and I would add to that, too, is clothing and feeding is and putting a roof over your head is the baseline.
Yeah.
You decided to have a child. It is your responsibility to educate that child. That kid cannot pay for anything.
Yep.
You bought him a car at 16. What the fuck were they going to do?
Right.
So I think that raising a child does not necessarily mean you owe your parents anything.
Right.
They made the choice.
They could have aborted.
That's right.
And I think of all of the reasons why we think Doug probably should have been aborted, like the fact that they were shitty parents, they should have definitely not had kids. They made that choice.
Yeah.
And they are responsible, and that means that they took on the responsibility of all of these things. So no,
but
I don't owe you anything. I didn't ask to be born, Dad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of parents use that cudgel, especially on their children who are, leaving their religion, and therefore kind of leaving their, what they feel is like their right, those rights over those kids. All I'm saying is, you don't owe your parents anything. Well, honestly,
and it's worth pointing out that that's an emotional abuse. That is a manipulation just to say that.
Right. You don't owe your parents anything outside of what you feel you owe them.
You're right. I put a house over your head. I put all this stuff. That's a manipulation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right?
Good job, Dad. You kept yourself out of jail. Go fuck yourself. Right. So, and that goes to this notion that roles and dynamics can and should change as we get older.
Yes.
Part of the problem is that religion frequently retards parents' normal ability to see their adult children as autonomous, mature beings responsible for their own needs and desires in a dynamic world. So oftentimes religious parents refuse to let the highly authoritarian patrician roles established in childhood evolve as their offspring get older.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, we've experienced it.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, well, it's just this is where we get phrases like, this is not how we raised you. We didn't raise you to be like this."
Right.
Like a whole bunch of like crazy stuff where it's like, "Dad, you did raise me to be like this because this is how I turned out."
Right.
Yeah. So there's also in religion the common conception that parents own their children.
Yeah.
So let's just clear that up. You do not own your fucking children. You're responsible to make them as functional and prepared as you can for whatever unforeseen future awaits them. It's a massive responsibility and beyond full-time job. They're not fucking toasters. If parents cannot handle that responsibility, they should not be getting into the business, right?
Right.
So circling back to the religious thing, there's this great tweet that and often retweeted little statement that our friend Dr. Chrissy Stroop has sent out. And again, I see it pop up all the time, and it says the following. You are not a traitor to your family for abandoning their religion, not conforming re gender and sexuality, making your own political lifestyle and ethical choices, and if your parents coerced you in the above matters, they betrayed you.
That's right.
Damn straight.
And if you wanted your child to simply go down the same path you did, politically, religiously, etc., what you should have done is bought a mirror. You shouldn't have wasted time having a child, right? We're autonomous people.
Yeah.
Well, except that, as we know, religion often says that, like, it's your responsibility, it's your most important job
to keep them in the fold.
To make them love Jesus, to make sure that they're paying me a lot of money just like you're paying me a lot of money.
Yeah. To instill them with the same fears and prejudices and
shame and horrible ideas.
Well, and not to divert just a little bit, the fact that religion is often one of the biggest causes of this friction when people divert from each other. When I left Mormonism, it wasn't okay with them.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't believe in the Book of Mormon anymore. I didn't believe in Joseph Smith anymore. And we couldn't have a relationship outside of my non-belief. So, you know what I mean? Like, they couldn't just accept me and say, well, you don't believe what we believe, but you're our son and we love you.
Right.
It was like, no, this is unacceptable.
Right.
You aren't welcome here anymore because of that.
Our love is entirely conditional.
Exactly.
Yes. Their unconditional love was so weighed down with asterisks you couldn't actually see the words. So,
and I think that's the case for a lot of people. I think one of the problems is that people don't see these signs as what they are, which are these are not when they say, "I just love you and I want you to be safe in the afterlife," and I want I cannot support you because you're making decisions that I know mean that you will go to hell or whatever.
How can I beat Jesus' love into you any harder?
Right. Well, what they're saying is, I can't love the you that you are.
Right.
They're literally telling you, I don't love you.
Right.
Yeah.
I love my vision of what I want you to be, but I don't love you.
Right.
I love a two-dimensional version of what I think you ought to be, and you have no right to move beyond that. Therefore, get out. Right.
Well, and I think to your point, Uncle Mark, is your presence in their life is entirely up to you.
Okay, so I'm going to get to that. Let me get through the rest of this, then we'll get to that because I think that's an interesting discussion. So, what do we owe parents normally? If they were kind and truly did the best they could in their circumstances to do right by you, a lot, I would say. I think you owe them gratitude for being kind that way. I think they deserve your respect. They deserve our presence in their lives, or our patient assistance with showing them how to open an attachment or use the remote. Or to try to answer their questions about...
But it's like the 50th time they've asked, and it gets hard.
But, and also answer their questions about what a Cardi B is. But...
I think it's a Twitter. Is that a Twitter?
I think it's a heart condition.
But if they're cruel, selfish, disapproving, hateful, etc., well... And if they refuse to adjust to you leaving their faith, or being queer, or becoming intimate with a person of the wrong race, or voting the wrong way, you may not need them in your life. Parents are not like an iTunes user agreement. They are not necessarily eternal. Yeah. You can leave. And maybe if they're sort of shitty people, being afraid of you turning your back on them is a good thing. Right?
Yeah.
Making that clear might be helpful in correcting unacceptable behavior.
That's a really interesting point. It's so funny because what we don't think about is I think societally we're fed a lot of lines like blood is thicker than water, right. And families first and all of these ideas. I didn't choose my family.
No.
You don't get a choice in that. Let me tell you something. My friend circle, I handpicked those motherfuckers.
Right.
That's right.
Exactly.
Every single one of them is there because they are valuable to me. And because I see beautiful things in each and every one of them.
Yeah.
Right. In Mormonism, when they told us you will spend eternity with your family, I nearly fainted. I didn't want to have fucking lunch with my family. I'm not going to spend fucking forever with them. So
yeah, that is not a selling point for many people, Mormonism.
Exactly.
Catch on.
So I made a list of things you are entitled to as a human being. Just a basic list. Uncle Mark's 8 things nobody gets to take away from you, right? You are entitled to boundaries. You are entitled to dignity. You are entitled to a voice. You are entitled to live without fear in close relationships. You are entitled to physical, mental, and emotional and sexual autonomy. You are entitled to an opinion. You are entitled to disagree. And lastly, you are entitled to choose who does and does not have access to your life. That also includes things like Facebook, people. So if someone in your life, parent, spouse, whomever, is robbing you of any of those entitlements or insisting you don't have a right to them, I say it's time to consider if they get to be in your life. People, not even parents, are not entitled to have you in their lives.
Right.
But they can earn your presence.
Yeah.
That should be the dynamic. If they want you there, they need to earn you. Right?
I think it's interesting that you brought up the notion of how none of us are psychologists. None of us know a lot about this stuff, but it is interesting that you can say, look, you can be in my life, and I actually maybe want you in my life, but there are real, very, very real rules that are going to have to be in place in order for that to happen. And if you transgress those rules, I will cut you out.
Yeah. I'm leaving. And again, it doesn't have to be...
Here.
It also doesn't have to be forever, right?
True.
You can just say, look, I can't be in this. I have to walk away from this when I get my head straight. A year from now, 2 years from now, we'll talk about Christmas again, right? We'll talk about coming home. But it doesn't have to be forever. I mean, in our case, Doug, I cannot possibly imagine how we could make a space for them again. But that's not true of everybody. And so I did read a bit, Dan, on the psychology of this whole thing and what the science says about it.
Right.
A British study found that roughly 8% of people in the UK had one or more estranged relationship. Another study there found it could be as high as 19%, so it's not terribly rare. If you include marriage as a form of estrangement, that's half of people at least in the United States, right?
Wait, what does that mean, marriage?
So divorce.
Divorce.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I look at this as divorce, right? Look at it's leaving a bad relationship.
Or it doesn't even have to be a bad relationship. It can be a relationship that doesn't work.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you have a right to not be in that relationship too.
That's right.
Right. There's a study that was published in the Journal of Australian Social Work that concluded there were 3 main reasons for estrangement, and they're going to be pretty obvious: abuse, betrayal, poor parenting. Now, each of those categories have multiple subheadings. There's, substance abuse, religion is part of it, but most bad behaviors fall into those 3 broad categories. Clearly, the situation Douglas and I came out of had all 3 of those in spades, so for us, it was the only sane choice to make. But here's the thing. I am objectively pro walking away from toxic relationships. If the circumstances merit, I am absolutely pro estrangement. You owe nothing to people who've taken from you your whole life. So I would caution against repeating my lost decade and center yourself in your thinking about who needs what, right?
Right.
And before we kind of open it up to whatever, I just want to say one last thing, because this constantly happens to me. If you have a friend who has walked away from family or whatever,
I was going to say,
and you feel obligated to tell them they've made a mistake or ask if they can't just reconcile, stop it.
Yep.
Fucking stop doing that. You do not know the circumstances. You do not know the circumstances that drove that decision. They are almost always far worse than you think. So check your fucking happy family privilege before you casually tell an abuse victim they should go crawling back to their abusers, okay? Yeah, that shit makes you part of the abuse and objectively pro-abuser, and I suspect you don't want to be that person, so don't be.
I'm just going to write a quick email to your parents saying, never mind, don't come to the party I'm throwing.
I'm afraid if you don't have a fax machine, they're not going to be able to receive that. So anyway.
If you can get it broadcast on Rush Limbaugh, they will hear it.
Yeah.
So it got a little serious, but fellas, let's just have a little discussion about it. And
I think...
go ahead.
Look, it's so funny to me. I am a person who... I've suffered some loss in my day. I've dealt with losing people that I do love, and I think because of that, and because I had a lot of therapy through all of that, I think I now have a healthier relationship with loss. But I know that people don't have a healthy relationship with loss a lot of the time, and the thought of losing someone is scarier than the thought of staying with someone that sucks. So I think that's something to work through. That's something to be thought about. I see a lot of people who aren't even willing to unfriend someone on Facebook who's a shit.
Yeah.
Like they'll block them, or they'll hide them or mute them or whatever. And it's just like, why are you afraid to just, you don't even know them in real life. You can just jettison them completely, and nothing bad will happen.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting that coming out of a religious spectrum, it's very commonly in patrician religions, it's women coming out of those situations that have a harder time cutting those strings, because they're taught that they are there to serve, right? And so women sometimes have a harder time doing that. But and let's just make clear that in me and Doug's situation, we're talking from a bit of a point of privilege, that we're both, white American men that have good jobs. So when we walked away, we didn't lose, our next meal.
Yeah, you were safe.
We were safe enough, right? And so not everybody can do that. But so if you're at a point in your life where you have a place to land, really think about who's taking what from you, right?
Yeah. And think about what you have the right to, because you definitely have the right to relationships without fear.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's an amazing thing to say, because a lot of people, and that's not just fear of a fist flying. If you dread going over to someone's house every time you go over to their house, this is a red flag.
Yeah.
You need to ask yourself some questions about that.
And it may be that there are difficult relationships that you believe are worth investing in.
True.
Yes.
Then that's your choice, right?
Absolutely.
But there are relationships, I think all of our listeners and all of us have and have had where it's just guilt.
Yeah.
And
inertia.
And shared past experience that keep us inertia, that keep us in this relationship. It's like, okay, I'm not making you better. You're not making me better. This is just hurting me. Yeah. And I can be selfish. I can say, I'm sorry, but I don't want this.
Also, that's not selfish.
Right.
You know what I mean?
No,
that's self-preservation.
Yeah.
Right.
Craft your goddamn life. One of the things that we say every week on this show is you only get one that we know of.
Yeah.
There's only one life that you get. Fucking make it good.
Well, that's why I think this is absolutely critical. This idea of you have the right to walk away. You have the right to happiness.
Yeah.
You have a right to your own fucking time and headspace. You are not required to keep giving to somebody who is only ever taken from you.
Well, and to your point, Uncle Mark, it's one of those things. I don't know why, but people don't. If you order a steak for lunch, nobody's going to judge you or say something to you at least about it. Mm-hmm. But if you tell almost a perfect stranger that, I'm kind of estranged from my parents, they have no problem saying, oh, you know what, you should fix that.
Yeah, my mom and I had a fight about a pair of shoes once, and I just thought, I got to get past this.
Wow, you really shouldn't be talking to me about this thing.
If you want to see Uncle Mark's blood pressure rise to the point where his eyeballs shoot out, please say that to him.
Yeah.
Well, and often what they say is, to your point, Uncle Dan, is, well, life's too short. You're like, yeah, it is.
Yeah. It's exactly too fucking short.
Right. Yeah, it's 100% too short for me to stick around with people who treat me badly when there's a world full of good people out there that I can find. Mm-hmm. And as I said, I love my friend group. I have crafted a friend group where we all take care of each other, we bolster each other, we treat each other with kindness and joy. We want to see everyone succeed. That's what my life is surrounded by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And goddamn, if someone comes into my life, anybody, if someone that I love, if any of those friends turns sour and isn't that thing anymore, peace. I don't need it.
Well, and to that point, my parents, all those things you listed about you and your friend group, that you care about each other, you are invested in each other's success, you support each other.
Right.
None of those things were operative with, which made the decision to leave my family much easier.
Right.
They weren't invested in my success. In fact, my success negated their existence in a lot of ways, and so they didn't want it.
Yeah, they're crabs pulling each other back into the pot.
Right. And how dare you leave this thing?
Right. A lot of families really do have an investment and an emotional and psychological investment in the rest of them doing as badly as they're doing.
Yeah.
Being as misery loves company. And when you guys, Dan, when you're talking about your friend group, I had this, obviously I walked out into adulthood as this desolate, battered, completely unprepared person. So when I started accumulating people that liked me and that wanted to be in my company, I kind of, lost myself for a while and ended up with this massive group of people that was, not all of them were looking out for me or had my best interests at heart. And it dawned on me one day, I don't have to like everybody.
No.
Right? And that was another huge revelation that followed on understanding I could leave my parents.
Right.
Was I don't have to like everybody I come across in this life. And
not only that, but you can take as many swings at your own happiness as you need to.
Yeah.
You don't have to settle for the fact that you failed a few times, the fact that you wandered into friend groups that were almost as toxic as what you just walked away from. Just keep trying.
Yeah, it's okay. You're gonna get there.
Yeah,
you're gonna find as our friend Paige says, you're gonna find your tribe, and I found my little tribe with my two uncles.
Oh. And that's
what better place to leave it?
If you need to leave your parents, at least you got your uncles.
That's right.
We're here for you.
All right.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, take care of yourselves, people, and do the right thing for you.
Yeah, exactly. And if someone has jettisoned people from their lives, they did it for a reason. Leave them alone.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on.